Hello dreamers, happy Friday. Last video we went over some more things to do in DreamWorld. We talked about the many crafting benches, such as the crafting bench, cooking station, spell bench, the alchemy table, and the smelting furnace. We went over all the foods you could make, the items you could craft, the ores you can smelt, the spells you can make, and the potions you can craft. Before we talk about today's video though, just a reminder that DreamWorld is available to play today. If you go down to the description, there's going to be a link there that'll go to DreamWorld's website where you can get the free trial for the game, or you can purchase the game if you like what you see in today's video, or if you like what you played in the trial. Again, head to the description of the video to get the link for the website. Anyways, today's video. Our topic is going to be combat. Let's go over some of the weapons you can use in DreamWorld, how the combat system works right now, and some of the wildlife and enemies you can fight, as well as the benefits of fighting them. So here we go. Let's take a look at combat in DreamWorld. Combat in DreamWorld starts the second you leave the city of Elysium. While you can hunt wildlife, on the city, it's mostly non-aggressive up there, but once you go down to the biomes below, you'll start to find more aggressive enemies and wildlife that you can actually fight with. Now, there are dedicated weapons in DreamWorld that deal a lot of damage. However, you can do combat with even the basic tools that you make at the start of the game. For example, the flint axe is even a tool that'll deal damage to enemies. It's not the most effective weapon, but it's certainly a method you can use. So yeah, you can fight with pickaxes, shovels, but the most effective tools to really, go bring into combat are going to be the axes. They're the most geared for combat. The shovels and pickaxes, they're kind of slow and they're not really designed, super well for combat. They're more for farming, but the axes can kind of be the two-sided tool, as in they can farm trees and can also deal a decent amount of damage. However, if you want to deal as much damage as possible and, utilize weapons that are specifically, geared for combat, you can craft 3 weapons right now. For long range, there's the bow. The wood bow can be crafted by actually farming skeletons in the desert. Skeletons drop sinew, which is a resource that is used to craft the bow. If you combine that with wood, you can make a bow. The wooden bow uses 3 different types of arrows. There's just regular arrows. The arrows can be crafted with any type of wood, feathers, and bee stingers. So bee stingers you can get by farming bees in the desert, specifically the desert. There's also the option of using poison or explosive arrows. Explosive arrows explode on impact and deal extra damage from that, while poison arrows deal poison damage over time. They're more expensive to craft than regular arrows, but also kind of worth it. I personally have a lot of fun with the bow, even though I'm not that great of a shot, but I still have fun with it. And then next we have the 2 swords you can make in the game, the iron sword and crystal swords. The iron sword can be crafted by using, iron. If you smelt iron, that you collect from the tundra, and then combine that with the fortified strips that you can make using bear hide, along with blue crabs and pine wood. You'll get a pretty good sword that does, a good amount of damage to mid to late game enemies, especially the harder ones that are in the tundra and mountains. But you could also use the crystal sword, which is even better than the iron sword. Either way, you'll have a weapon that does a good amount of damage output as opposed to using an axe. Now, along with these weapons, there's also, the ability to use spells. We went over the spell bench last video and how you could use that to craft spells that could deal a really high amount of damage, and how you could use them from long range to, be able to deal damage without taking it from enemies that are up close and personal, like the boars and the bears that deal a lot of physical damage. I've been using a lot of my firebolt recently, and it's been helping me a lot, in the tundra and mountain biomes. So there's some options for combat, whether you're using a up close and personal sword, a bow from long range, or some spells from long range, or even early game if you're using a tool. Now, so you have your weapons and everything. What are some of the enemies that you can fight in the different biomes? We'll start with the forest. In the forest, there's a lot of enemies you can hunt that actually won't even fight back. Rabbits, chickens, and deers are all gonna drop raw meat, as well as a few other items you can get for them, like for example, the chickens. They drop, uncooked chicken eggs. This wildlife is actually pretty easy to hunt, but there's also other types of enemies too. There's the many crocodiles that are not just in the forest, there's also some in the desert, but you'll encounter them a lot in the forest. These crocodiles drop some bones, some crocodile jaws, which are pretty important, at least for crafting. And then they also drop meat. There's bees, which are just, the regular bees. Desert bees are a little different. We'll get to them later. But the regular bees, will drop berries. And if you kill the bees, which are usually near, a beehive, you can actually farm honeycombs from the beehive. Then there's, tiny boars that you'll find sometimes wandering around the forest. These enemies get very aggressive at night. In fact, special wildlife actually spawns in the nighttime that, aggroes on you, and you're gonna have to make sure you have a lot of health, a lot of healing, and some weapons on you to fight them off. So you can farm at night, but be very careful. Luckily for you though, once the sun comes out and day breaks, these enemies, are forced to run off or, be damaged by the sun. And lastly, in the forest, there are the goblins. Now there's a few different, ways you can encounter goblins. You might encounter them just as you're roaming throughout the forest. They might be just above the ground and you can, find them. And, you farm them. They drop some pretty cool stuff like wax root seeds. You can plant those to grow wax roots that you can bring to the actually city of Elysium, and you can get a mount. But they also drop, cooked meat, kebabs, and some potions, as well as building assets. You can't forget building assets. In fact, a lot of enemies and wildlife that you actually will farm can drop building assets that, add building pieces to your catalog. You'll also find goblins underground in caves. In fact, they appear down here in abundance in the caves. If you go down to farm, maybe it's mountain stone or coal, there's lots of goblins down here. So every time I go into a cave, I make sure to bring some healing potions, a lot of food, and a couple weapons, because I know I'm gonna come out with a lot more meat and a lot more potions. I farmed a good amount of kebabs just going into caves. You might even also above ground find some goblin camps. There'll be a couple goblins around a campfire sometimes. You'll find some goblin warriors, as well as, maybe a goblin chief or a goblin shaman. The chief is going to be a harder to kill goblin that's in melee, and then the shaman will shoot spells at you. So either be prepared to counter with your own spells or be prepared to kill the shaman pretty quick. Spell damage can deplete your health bar pretty quickly. And lastly, if you go way far out from the island of Elysium in the sky, you'll find a special type of goblin, the goblin archer, which actually defends green crystal deposits. These archers hit you with a lot of bleed damage, which can tank your health really quick if you don't have the proper armor to fight them. I tried fighting them with leather armor, and it was not a fun time. But yeah, that's the many different ways that goblins will appear in DreamWorld. But let's talk about the desert. So the desert has a few different enemies, actually kind of similar to the forest. There's the boars. These are, bigger boars than the tiny ones you'll find near the forest. These are harder to kill, but will drop hides and more meat than the tiny boars. You can also find your crocodiles, again, around the desert. And then you also see desert bees. These are a bit tougher than the ones you'll find in the forest. They're a bit bigger, but they drop bee stingers, which allow you to craft arrows. You can also farm their hives as well. You'll get beeswax and honeycombs from farming these bees. Plentiful. For the mountains, you'll basically find one type of wildlife here, and that's bears. There'll be, goblins in the caves, but above ground, it's mainly mountain bears. Now these are super important to farm though still, because you'll get bear hide as well as, bear claws and meat. The bear hide is very important for making fortified strips, which allow you to make higher tier armor. This higher tier armor is gonna allow you to get up close and personal into melee combat with, enemies in the tundra, and even against the mountain bears, without taking too much damage. Leather armor is fine, but you're gonna wanna mitigate as much damage as possible against the harder enemies in the game. And lastly, in the tundra, we have, a few different enemies. There's the regular bears, the tundra bears, which basically have the same loot drops as the ones in the mountains. Then there's the snowmen, Frosty shooting beams out of his hands. These snowmen, they drop candy and snow. They shoot spells at you, and if you have, lower tier armor, they're pretty hard to kill, and they deal a lot of damage. So definitely make sure to either fight them ranged or to have, some pretty good blocking skills against them, or some pretty, good armor to go up against the snowmen. And then you have the ice boars. Ice boars drop a special type of, ice boar, hide. Ice boars drop a special type of ice boar hide, which is used to craft a few different things at the benches. So those are some of the, wildlife and enemies you'll encounter throughout the game, as well as what they drop. Now let's talk about combat itself. What are some of the features we want to really dial in on? Well, different types of weapons deal different types of damage. Like a flint axe deals less damage than an iron sword. Damage output can be actually altered by, consuming potions. For example, the Strength potions make you do more melee damage, and the fortified potions give you more armor defense. When fighting enemies, be sure to utilize your block skill. You can get a few hits in on enemies, but ever so often they're gonna attack you back, so when you see they're about to attack you back, hit your block button, right mouse button that is, and that'll allow you to block the attack, which reduces damage taken to you, as well as deals a little bit of damage back to the enemy if you time it right. While fighting enemies, you might actually notice that, midway through the fight, the enemy might retreat and attempt to heal. The best way to combat this is to actually get the enemy to start attacking you again. You could try still fighting it while it's healing, but that's not gonna really get much done, so I usually try to just bait it back into an attack, and then you can more easily take out the enemy. Also, going back to blocking, feel free to craft a shield. I've used a shield plenty of times. It has a more effective block, it'll reduce damage taken even more. And also note that when using ranged weapons, be very conservative when using them. Your mana bar can run out pretty fast, when using spells, especially when you first unlock spells. And your arrows can go away pretty quickly, and you can't pick those back up. Once you use an arrow, it's used. Lastly, let's talk about the things that impact your combat as you continue to do it. Skills. There's a few different types of skills in DreamWorld. For example, there's melee, there's archery, there's agility, and there's magic. These are some of the major ones that are going to impact your combat. For example, as you level up your melee skill, you're going to output more melee damage. As you upgrade your magic skill, you're going to output more magic damage, as well as have your mana bar drain, slower. You'll have to use less mana every time you use your spell. To level all these up, just continue to play the game, and you'll see your levels go up the more that you actually use your skills. But that's basically the basics of combat in DreamWorld. These are some of the weapons you can make, some of the different, means of going about combat that you can take. And there's a few different enemies to fight that all drop meaningful loot to help you progress throughout the biomes. We hope you enjoyed today's video. If you liked what you've seen, you want to get to fighting in DreamWorld, as well as, building, farming, and crafting, head on down to the description to check out the link to our website, where again, you can find a way to download the free trial or to buy the game. Look forward to next video, where we're going to be taking a look at the themed building assets you can unlock in DreamWorld and how you can combine them to make super unique looking builds. Have an amazing Friday, Dreamers. Hope to see you next time. Bye bye.